Okay guys, first I'd like to start with what an amazing event the Fight Pass Invitational 6 was. It was definitely flying under the radar. You got like matches such as J-Rod versus Jonathas Alves, and it's like, no big deal, we don't even tell you about it. So it's definitely an awesome event. It was fully packed, awesome matches, high level, all of those. Especially the main portion, but it was not without problems as well. So we'll get to some of the issues which I believe that Fight Pass Invitational has, and also we'll discuss obviously the good sides additionally. So the issues are the rule set, right? I think it needs a more of a detailed video just to address all the rules and all the issues with the rules, but it is clear that they have not fully made up their mind about how they're going to go about this whole thing, and also the referees who are very high level referees. I mean, in this case we had Shaolin Roberto, who is a very high level referee, and also the practitioner, jiu-jitsu practitioner in his own right. He was also not sure what to do in certain circumstances, so they need a more clear-cut protocol, in my opinion, to have. Even if it's perhaps not the greatest protocol, they need more clear-cut protocol, in my opinion. So one of the main issues that I believe there is in most tournaments, when you are in a submission and you need to be brought back into the middle, and it cannot be done without dragging you in, and mostly in a submission, in locked submission, it's very hard to do. You get a restart. Obviously, this creates problems on both sides as well. So let's say you had a submission, you felt like you were close to finishing it, now they're returning you to the middle and just giving you 2 points. It's a problem, right? So I was about to finish the match and now you give me 2 points, which could mean that I'm down, because I could be losing the match until then, and now I had the chance to finish, and all of a sudden I'm just getting 2 points for that, right? On the other hand, this rule exists because recreating the position exactly the same way as it was before the restart is very hard. I mean, it's probably, we call it the game of inches, right? So it's next to impossible to recreate exactly the same position, unless it was, let's say, like fully locked rear naked choke that, okay, it was locked, the hand was behind the head, and we had to, but most cases like that, you would let them continue, right? I mean, if it's a locked rear naked choke, unless they fell off the platform in this case, you would let them continue. Also, in a lot of the tournaments, if you are in a submission and you roll out on purpose, if the ref decides that you did it on purpose to roll out of a submission, then you will most likely get a DQ, and it's almost like a submission without having to recreate the position and stuff like that. So you just fleeing the fight, and it's not allowed. So this is another mechanism that exists to protect against playing around with the borders of the mat. But as I mentioned, usually recreating exactly the same position as before, it's almost, in most cases, impossible. The situation we had in a match, Mason Fowler versus Pedro Marinho, so obviously it was a close match, very tightly contested. In the earlier parts of the match, especially in the regulation, Pedro got a bit better of Mason, but Mason is a very crafty veteran, and he slowly got back into the match as time progressed, and over time he got to a dominant position. He got the mount in the overtime and was working towards an arm triangle, right? He was winning anyway, but he was working towards the arm triangle, and they were close to the bounce, and it was a situation where Pedro was fighting it, and he was trying to get the elbow back into play so that Mason couldn't finish the choke. But in a moment where Pedro exploded and looked like that he was close to maybe bettering his position, maybe not fully getting out, or maybe even fully getting out, but at least bettering the position, the referee restarted the match, in the middle of the mat. So he had them disengage, got them up, and put them back into the middle, right? This time around, the ref gave Mason Fowler a position which looked like when the coach is explaining a move on a guy and wants to show, let's say, how to finish an arm triangle, and says like, okay, this is where you put your head, and almost like gave him a perfect position for the arm triangle. Was probably next to a situation where giving somebody fully locked rear neck choke when they may not have had exactly fully locked, when arm could have been here, but now the arm is back and the choke is in. It was like textbook picture perfect position, and then they said go, and it almost felt like positional sparring that you may do when you are training certain position. Let's say you are training arm triangle escapes, and 9 times out of 10 you will get a finish there, but you're working on the defense. So it was like that, and you're giving this high level guy in Mason Fowler a position fully locked in, which it didn't look like to me that he fully had that type of a perfect position to have a crack at finishing Pedro Marinho, and it was almost like he would have to make some really big technical errors to not get that submission over Pedro Marinho. So there's my thoughts about that, and they need to seriously consider how they are doing the restarts, especially there were other moments as well. So they will have to seriously work on those enforcement on how they're actually handling situations like that, because it's very important. And I understand that they are pushing the spectator side of the sport because it's important to make it commercially viable, but you also cannot fully take away from the integrity of the sport. I mean, the integrity of the sport has to remain as much as possible, obviously. We had some insane matches, I mean, great on paper, and a lot of them also delivered as well in action. J Rod versus Jonathas Alves was a very good match. In the beginning, Jonathas did very good job with the guard play and even created some issues for J Rod, but then over time J Rod broke him down, and Jonathas Alves basically kind of cracked under pressure. I think the pivotal moment might have been the buggy choke attempt by J Rod, and it didn't look like it was fully in, and obviously was not fully in, but it created a lot of pressure, and you could see it on the face of Jonathas that the choke was pretty tight. It probably messed with his head a bit and also messed up his breathing, and over time when he got up he also looked a bit shaky between the regulation and the overtime. And overtime it was mostly just J Rod pressuring and getting close to cracking Jonathas Alves, and then taking the back in a good scramble and getting the choke. Given the recent showing of J Rod, recent performances by J Rod, I would say that it was probably a little bit of an upset, but you can never count out J Rod, especially if you let him spread his wings and play his own game. Usually he's a very athletic and explosive and just a cardio machine who can create some serious issues for anybody pretty much. You have to slow him down and you have to push him into your technical game where he cannot engage as he wishes. So the next match we had Ronaldo Jr. versus Kody Steele. It was also an insane match, great match, all action-packed. And with that match we are slowly seeing the development of Ronaldo Jr.'s game, where he's becoming well-rounded, also adapting well to the no-gi game and bringing his dynamic game that he had in the gi into no-gi now and creating almost equal danger on this side of the sport. He created a lot of issues for Kody Steele. I would say he dominated the regulation, which is a very important part of the match. Unless you get the points later on, I would say it's probably the most important part of the match. And in the overtime, Kody still had his moments. Obviously, he had the awesome suplex, which would be great for any type of highlight reel on the planet. Ronaldo Jr. had a very close guillotine attempt, and Kody still had to use every ounce of his skill defensively to escape that very tight choke. I mean, it was a high elbow guillotine, and it looked like he may get it, but sometimes when you have a very explosive guy like Kody Steele, who is very good at scrambling, and you're only controlling the neck, and you start like catch the neck standing up, and then kind of creates the scramble, they usually manage to slip out unless you somehow quickly manage to also control their hips with your legs. So another match, the King Meregali versus Matheus Diniz. Obviously, both of them are very high-level competitors. Anybody who understands grappling, they knew that Meregali was a huge favorite in this match. I mean, it was his match to lose. It would have to be, the match would have to go seriously wrong for him to lose. It was almost, I didn't see any avenues for Matheus Diniz to win this match. Anybody that plays a technical game with, I mean, pretty much anybody, I can think of anyone that plays technical game with Meregali, Jiu-Jitsu for Jiu-Jitsu, good luck. And Matheus Diniz, even though he was bigger for this match, has fought mostly in 88 kilos in ADCC. He's the former ADCC champion as well. But on the last ADCC, Giancarlo Bodoni defeated him, who then also became the champion that year. Giancarlo and Meregali are teammates in the new wave, and I suspect that mostly Meregali just all around better guy on the mat. And even on that ADCC, they had a match in the absolute, and Meregali won that match against fairly handily against Giancarlo. And it was his very early steps in the no-gi game, in development. That year, as we know, he got a silver medal. So he was already very high level, but I would say he's now leaps and bounds above where he was previously, especially at that time. So I expect it happened, and Meregali got the submission win, took the back, and he'll be a very hard guy to beat for a lot of people, if not everybody else. And to be frank as well, one of the issues that I wanted to discuss is the order of the matches, right? You may say it's not that important, but it's probably important when you're dealing with that, when you're dealing with high-level athletes and high-level event. In my opinion, just on a status alone, former ADCC champion fighting against probably maybe the number one guy today, or at least in a lot of people's opinions, number one guy, now that Gordon is not competing for now, Nicolas Meregali. If not main event, should probably be a co-main event. I understand Craig Jones's star power, especially now him being associated with Volkanovski and UFC doing a lot of work to market grappling to MMA fans as well. I understand the main event part, but I would say Meregali versus Matheus Diniz should have been above Nicky Rod versus Jimenez. So that leads me into the next match, which was the co-main event, Nicky Rod versus Jimenez. And this was a rematch of their previous match on UFC Fight Pass. But they had a little bit of a different set of rules, EBI rules, and they did away with those rules now, and I believe it's a good move. I'll not get into those details why in this video. The last match, Jimenez created a lot of problems in the regulation for Nicky Rod. If it was just regulation and you had judge decision, I would say most likely Jimenez won that match before the overtime, EBI overtime, and previously he has a win against Nicky Rod as well. And on the first match, it was I think they had the biggest size difference. Later on, Jimenez also put on some weight, and I think Nicky Rod trimmed down a bit. But the first match really looked like a David versus Goliath match, and Jimenez pulled it out, and he beat Nicky Rod. So the second match obviously went to Rodriguez, and now it was like a rubber match type of deal, which, as we know now, was won by Nicky Rod as well. He did much better all around, even in the regulation with the wrestle ups and with the top control against Jimenez. And I think he's probably studied him more and prepared specifically for him more and took him seriously, because one guy, when he beats you once and then almost beats you the second time, even though there's a size difference, you have to kind of adjust to what he's doing to you, and he most likely did that and used the wrestle ups really well to achieve success in this case. And then in the end, he got the submission in the overtime, and this time around it was not the EBI overtime, so you cannot really argue with that result. And the main event, Craig Jones versus Lovato Jr. Man, Rafael Lovato is a serious legend. I'm a huge fan of his, but what is he now, 40 years old, and has been through a lot of different issues. Okay, he's undefeated MMA fighter as well, had to quit MMA because of the medical issues. He's one of the most decorated American competitors as well in Jiu-Jitsu, and just an awesome guy. But I think what this match was another Craig Jones match where he's taking on the guys he has a high chance of beating. I don't want to call it a mismatch because of the status of Lovato, but at this point in their careers, it's probably as a mismatch. And as soon as Craig Jones got in on a leg, it was very hard to imagine that Lovato would be able to defend that inside heel hook, even the outside heel hook, and against one of the best leg lockers in the game. If Lovato had any chance, it would have to be in the traditional positions, but even there, Craig is very sound, and at this point, Lovato probably is not capable of beating the top of the game. I mean, he can beat a lot of the young guys coming up, he can spoil a lot of parties, but for him to beat guys like Craig Jones, Meregali, obviously Gordon Ryan, and others, it's a very tall task. I would like to see the next one, Meregali versus Craig Jones. This will be the rematch of their ADC match, and it was a very close match, the ADC, their first match. And as we discussed, Meregali now is at a different point in his career, and he's only going to develop. He's just a very, very high level guy. At this point, I'm just amazed by his abilities. And so is Craig Jones. Craig Jones is amazing, but I don't think, it doesn't look like he wants to take that match. I think if the match happens, it would be a good match, even though in my book, Meregali would be the favorite. But the way it looks like and the way the post-fight interview sounded like, he doesn't want to take that match. Craig Jones, that is. Hey guys, so let me know your thoughts about the matches. Who do you think should fight next? Obviously, we need to take into consideration overall grappling picture. We cannot just go by UFC Fight Pass because it exists, and in a way UFC Fight Pass, when you pay attention to the commentary, kind of acts like the other invitationals don't exist and those guys are not going up against each other in other invitationals. I would say when the matchmaking happens behind the closed doors at the UFC FPI, they take into consideration the other results outside of their organization. For now, they can't, and they don't have probably the ability to keep them exclusive, obviously. And as fans, we have to do the same. We have to take it into consideration. So considering all of those other matches that have happened in the near past, let me know your thoughts. Who should go up against who, and what type of matchups would you like to see leading up to the biggest tournament of the year and overall in general. Besides that, please like, share and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I would be very glad if you would support me.